All right, so welcome everyone to this afternoon's Crafting an Effective Personal Statement. I appreciate everyone coming. While folks are trickling in still, drop in the chat where you're interested in applying to. What type of program? Is it a graduate program in history or is it med school? We'd love to just see what it is that everyone's headed towards or interested in, or perhaps even applying for right now. I recognize some names of folks that we've worked with together already, so I know you're in the process. As we get started today, I just wanted to recognize the importance of a personal statement in the overall package when applying to a graduate program. There feels, I'm sure, for all of you, a lot of weight on this. And yes, it is an important document, but recognize it is a piece of many other components, like your resume, your transcripts, letters of recommendation. For some folks, exams like an MCAT or a GRE. So yes, it is important and you do want to put effort into it, but it is not, at least in my view, and we'll meet our other panelists here in a second, the linchpin, the only thing, the thing that's going to start or stop your success. But you do want to have a nice, well done personal essay. And that's what we hope to get through and help you get more familiar with and comfortable with today. Um, we're going to provide tools for success, advice on writing these broadly, resources that you can access to continue on your own. And to get started, I'd just like everyone to introduce themselves. We'll do it in the order of the slide, so all of you in the audience knows who you're speaking with.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you everybody who are joining us today. My name is Kimberly Buxbeck. I am the Director of Pre-Professional Health Advising. So I work with students who are preparing for professional school applications in the health professions.
And I'm Barbara Gorka. I'm the Director of Scholar Development and Fellowships Advising. I work with a lot of students on personal statements for fellowships, but many of you might not know that we also support students who are preparing personal statements for graduate and professional school. So all three of our offices are three of the four or more who support students applying for graduate school.
And I'm Bob McMahon. I'm the Associate Director of Career Development at the University Career Center. And I also meet with students, provide one-on-one feedback and support on your personal statements for whatever the thing is, and helped bring together this group of experts to walk us through today's presentation. Here's a quick outline just so you have an idea of where we are and where we're going to go. We've done our introductions. We're going to overview the elements of a personal statement. Now, mind you, sometimes you'll find very specific things in one that you might encounter. So we're going to talk broadly in most cases. We're going to review common pitfalls that we all see because we have collectively, I would guess, see what you all think, probably read thousands of these as a collective group of people, of faculty and staff that are working with in this space. So we know we've seen the common pitfalls. That's why we can call them common. We're going to do an analysis and discussion of some sample introductory paragraphs. The introductory paragraph is often a big obstacle for folks. So we're going to show some samples that might give you some ideas and also things not to do. And then we'll go through some additional tips and resources at the end. And of course, we'll take any questions that you may have at the end. So to get started, a personal statement is a few things. It is broadly an indication of your priorities, your interests, sometimes your goals in the future. Maybe a career goal is something you have to talk about. But importantly, it's a story, and it's your story. It's not my story or anyone else's. It's your story. And I encounter a question often that makes me think about this very bullet point, an emphasis on, I want my personal statement to stand out. I want it to be different than everyone else's. Well, I say, don't worry about that. It will be different. It's your story. It's nobody else's. And that's what's going to inherently make it different. It's a narrative, it's an argument, and it's reflective resume all in one document, which makes it interesting and a little complicated to write. So we'll walk through some of those points in a greater detail. So if we think about personal statement as a narrative, what that means is it's all about your academic and career trajectory. You're connecting dots in many cases between the past, your present, and your future. You may answer a variety of questions, such as what led you to your interests in this profession, this field of study, right? Something in the past that led you to this. What are you going to do now to prepare you for graduate school and your future goals? Like what's happening now? What are you doing? If applicable, do you know what you want to study or research or specialize in? So something more present and forward looking. And then lastly, what type of work or research do you see yourself doing after you complete your degree? What are your career goals? This is very future looking and often another challenging component for folks writing these documents. Because I think so much of our emphasis at the moment is let me just get into the program and then I'll figure it out, which I get it, it's a strategy, but we have to push a little further to really make a strong personal essay here and think about and articulate some clear goals. As a narrative, I think the tone is engaging, interesting, and uniquely you. So write in your own voice as you speak, as you would talk to me about it, or Barbara, or your friends, or whomever, right? Just make it be you. So personal statement as an argument, in order to make a persuasive case in this document, ask yourself, and this is like having to set aside some time to do some internal inventory, if you will. What experiences like research, coursework, internships, volunteering, student organizations, anything have helped prepare you to excel in the program and in your discipline or field or career going forward? So I can't tell you what they are because you have to like think through that and make an inventory and reflect about that. Why do you want to belong in this specific program or school? Except in the case of a common application like medical school, for example, where you're going to write one personal essay. You can send it to a bunch of schools, but it's always the same essay. It's the same question. That's the central application or a common application. So outside of that, when you decide, hey, I want to apply to 5 schools, 8 schools, 10 schools, you're going to have to explain individually, I want to apply to this school for these reasons. I'm applying to that school for those reasons. There won't be, this is, I guess, a long way of me saying you won't be able to just write one personal essay and submit it everywhere, unless you're applying to med school, which, hey, maybe that's the thing that you decide. I think I'll apply to med school now instead of 8 grad programs. As an argument, though, the tone is professional, right? So again, I say be yourself, but be your professional self, okay? So then the next component before I hand it over to Kim is thinking about your personal statement as a reflective resume. So in other words, not I'm going to just write in a narrative story everything that's on my resume. It's reflecting. You can hint to it. You highlight, but not list key academic, volunteer, or work or internship experiences that illustrate your readiness, right? For grad school, for the rigors of it, the challenges of it. It's a reflection on your experiences that set yourself apart from the other applicants, right? So again, if our concern is as a writer, I want to be different than the other people applying to this thing, this is how it's going to happen. It's not going to happen artificially. It's already in you, and you just have to unlock or get some help unlocking those reflections. So what is unique, special, distinctive, impressive about you or your life story? Now, I know many of you because I've met with some of you and I've met with many others outside of this group who almost instinctively devalue their experiences. Like, oh, that was really no big deal. Well, actually, it probably is, right? So it's fighting through that sort of self-talk that devalues things that you've accomplished. It's also thinking about details of your life. So maybe family, history, people, events, things that have influenced and shaped your goals. For some folks, there's this one big aha moment, and for others, it's more of a path of a few different directions. Neither is the right answer. Both are very interesting. But it's again thinking about those details as it specifically relates to you that's going to help the committee better understand you and then again set you apart from other applicants. And with that, let me kick it off to Kim, who's going to talk about some pitfalls to avoid.
Thank you very much, Bob. Before I go on to the next slide, I really want the audience to hold on to what Bob just said. What details of your life have shaped or influenced your goals? And that is something that I personally think if you sit on that and reflect on that, it's going to open up potential themes, ideas for your personal statement that is unique to you and everything that you've done to prepare yourself for whatever this next step is, whatever you're preparing for. Because a personal statement, Bob just said, is a persuasive argument. It's a pitch of self. It's connecting the dots between the present and your future. But you really need to become familiar with reflecting on your experiences because a personal statement is going to follow through and carry through with you. And it's something that you're going to continue to work on throughout your life, not just for preparing for graduate school or professional school. So with that said, where I would like to take the conversation is discussing some of the common pitfalls that we see as we review personal statements. And we want to bring up these common pitfalls as a way of things to consider and things to avoid. So Bob touched on what a personal statement is. It's also important to consider these pitfalls as things to avoid. So this is not what becomes of your personal statement, okay? So I'm going to walk you through some of the common pitfalls that we see. So the first tip or the first common pitfall to avoid is to avoid generic statements about your interests. So for example, we want you to show and not tell. Rather than saying something like you're passionate about German, we encourage you to show your passion through specific actions or habits. So you might say something like this: after returning from studying in Germany, my friends were ready to kick me out. I listened to German rock at all hours. I spoke German when they addressed me in English, and I kept preparing German dishes for our shared dinners. Doing it this way, you're not just stating an interest, you're illustrating it and letting the reader see your enthusiasm and action. So we definitely encourage, if you're going to list things like helping people or passionate about people or something, that you want to not just state this, you want to illustrate it and tell it so that you're able to use your experiences to define this a little bit more. Another common pitfall to avoid is to avoid statements like something cliche like I like to help people. So you want to steer clear of cliches, especially as it relates to helping people. Many people write that they like to help people, which is definitely vague, can feel overused. And what we encourage folks to do is explain what helping means to you in a more concrete way. So for instance, if you're going to talk about volunteering, you could go into more depth or detail by saying something along the lines of, volunteering at a free clinic allowed me to contribute to my community and learn about the importance of health education and services in economically struggling neighborhoods. So here you're actually showing how your actions align with your values and giving the reader or the committee insight into how the impact the experience had on you. So our second piece of advice is to avoid cliche statements. So another common pitfall to avoid would be also to avoid getting too personal or overly personal. So when writing about personal challenges or difficult experiences, you want to be selective. You don't want to be dramatic. If there is a difficult experience that you want to mention, you can keep it brief, but you want to talk about how it's influenced you in a positive way, whether it be in a positive way for your professional journey or maybe even your academic journey. Maybe there were some struggles, but you were able to overcome those challenges. So rather than discussing like the specifics of a traumatic event, you might want to highlight how it motivated you, how you changed by it. The last common pitfall on this particular slide is also you want to make sure to avoid starting your statement with something catchy just because. So you don't want to start drama for the sake of attention. Like a catchy opener is great, but it's only effective if it's authentic. Going back to exactly what Bob was saying. If it's authentic, if it truly adds to your story, then it's something to incorporate. But otherwise, if you're just looking for a hook and it's not natural, it doesn't lead to what your narrative of the story is, you just don't want to have that within your statement.
And Kim, we have a question that I think is kind of relevant to one of the pitfalls that well, it could be, depends.
Huh?
So can I address that
Let's go back.
question?
Sure.
Tony asks, where did it go? If it's better to write about convictions or to be more career and research based. And this can get to, when you talk about convictions, it's very easy then to fall in the trap of telling and not showing. So I don't want to say it's a yes or no to it's not an either or here because
Right.
it's all about showing. You don't also just want to have a narrative resume when you say be career research based. You want to decide what's your message. What
Yep.
do you want your readers to remember about you, and then show us your convictions or through action, or show us your career and research that have influenced your trajectory. So it's not like yes to convictions, no to career, or the other way around. It's what's important and how does this fit in to what you're applying for. But you just really want to be careful. I often talk to students about, hey, you're philosophizing here. You're telling us what you believe in, but you're not showing us what you're doing with what you believe in. Are you taking action? Are you studying this? Are you researching it? Are you seeking? So again, you want to be careful not just to tell us your beliefs, but to give us actions, and also that reflective component. So I thought that was relevant just with that showing, not telling
Absolutely.
pitfall.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the actions that Barbara speaks of, a lot of the times those actions are carried by your experiences. So using specific examples of the experiences that you've been through, whether they're directly related. I mean, the line of work and the students that I advise primarily are going to professional school. So a lot of reflection on their direct med related experiences are those action pieces that students are reflecting on in their personal statement.
And we had another question
Mhm.
about whether it's okay to talk about your sexuality if it's relevant, and another student who said echoed the same question, that their identities have informed their career goals a lot. So in that case, the way the student says that the identities have informed their career goals, and if that graduate program, I'm assuming, leads to those career goals, then in a situation like that, I think it's totally relevant.
Yes.
And this again is all about how you tell your story. If we go to that bottom pitfall, yeah, the saying starting with something catchy just because, that falls in that can even be broader. Don't tell us something about your past if it's really not connected to what you're proposing to do. If it is, then most likely you're going to find a way to insert it somewhere in your essay.
Yeah. I
Okay,
think
I think we've got all the questions answered at this point, but keep them coming and we'll go to the, I guess, next slide.
sure. And I'd like to also hold that word connection that Barbara just said, keeping that all in mind, because when you build your personal statement, you are connecting it to you, your preparation, but it's also important that you are connecting your story together in some sort of way too. With that said, let's move on to some more common pitfalls to avoid. Okay, so the next one is you want to avoid sharing your entire life story. There is a lot of pressure when creating a personal statement. Sometimes you're not really quite sure where to start. You want to cover everything. You want to start from childhood, work your way up to the present moment. Before a personal statement, it isn't necessary. And a lot of times when you're applying to graduate school, professional school, or even just applications, there are character limits that we need to stay within. So what I say is, as a general rule, maybe you want to skip over experiences from high school unless they are like truly pivotal experiences and why you're landing into the next direction of what you're applying for. And instead, focus on a few key experiences that best explain your motivation and are connected as to why you've chosen those to the profession that you're preparing for. So select a few experiences. And then also when you are reflecting in your personal statement, you really want to make it sound like you. You don't necessarily need to use big words if they're not words that you would normally use. You don't want necessarily a conversational tone, but you want it to sound like you. You don't want to use big words like Joey tried to do just for the sake of trying to sound impressive from this clip from Friends.
I don't understand.
Sorry, I was trying to put the volume up.
Some of the words a little too sophisticated for you.
It doesn't make any sense.
Well, of course it does. It's smart. I use the thesaurus. On every word? Yep.
What was this sentence originally?
Oh, they are warm, nice people with big hearts. And that became they are humid, prepossessing Homo sapiens with full-sized aortic pumps. And hey, I really mean it, dude.
I mean, really funny stuff right there. But when it comes to your personal statement, you want to try to write clearly, use your own voice. You don't need to use sophisticated vocabulary to make yourself stand out. It's really about your journey, connecting your experiences to where you are today. And again, to write in your own voice to make yourself stand out. Okay, we're going to wrap this up with a few more common pitfalls to avoid. So sometimes when writing a personal statement, it could be tempting to write about your parents, maybe even a social issue, an event that really you care about. But please remember that your personal statement is to learn about you. So focus on the details of what you've done, reflect on the experiences that you've completed, and how these have impacted you directly, rather than writing your statement about an issue or about somebody else. And another thing, I mean, one of the things that we opened up is by talking about how a personal statement is a reflective resume, but it's not restating your whole entire resume. You want to showcase some of your accomplishments that really connect to who you are and your goals. But also you want to be able to use experiences that demonstrate how you've learned, how you grew, and how you've been inspired. So that's something to consider. And also with regard to not restating your resume, I think that a lot of students think that a personal statement should be written in chronological order. And that could be an instinct, which is fine. But just note that when you're building your personal statement, the story doesn't need to be linear. And what I usually encourage students to think about is if you're going to make an outline of the experiences that really truly stand out most for you, think of some like thematic structure that connects all of those experiences, because sometimes that really creates what the personal statement background might be. And you have a particular theme that you can use throughout your statement to connect all your experiences to. But don't feel like you have to do that in a chronological way. Oop. So with that said, my mouse got a little bouncy. I'm going to pass it off to my colleague and friend, Barbara, who is going to actually walk us through some sample prompts.
Yeah, and I see Adam has a question about parents and if they were influential in your path. We'll see a sample that's related to that. So we'll talk about your question when we get to that sample. And Tony, maybe we can get to your question later on. So we're using first paragraphs because we don't have the time to be able to read 4 sample personal statements when each of them could be 500 to 1,000 words. So for the sake of the workshop, we're going to use the opening paragraph. But before we see these samples, what we have here are some sample prompts, and they can be relatively specific. Many of them are going to be similar to the first. It's sort of why graduate study at this school, give us your academic and research interests, your career objectives, how the degree will enable you to achieve your goals. Again, when they say something like that, enable you to achieve your goals, that means you have to articulate your goals so they are able to match the program, your experiences, and your future. It could be something a little different, like the second one. Attach a statement of about 2 pages describing important or unusual aspects of yourself, not otherwise apparent in your application. There are some graduate programs that might have 2 essays. One might be research focused. The other could be something like this, tell us about yourself. Every application will be different except for the common ones. So you do have to pay attention to what are they asking me to do. The med school ones and similar common ones are that vague. Tell us about why you want to be a physician. I think a lot of law schools have something similar to that as well. Those often are the hardest because they're not giving you that tell us X, Y, and Z. And then there could be ones like the final, how have your background and life experiences? And they're talking a lot of things, cultural, geographical, financial, educational, citizenship status, motivated your decision to pursue a graduate degree, excuse me. So again, what you write about is going to depend on you and your story, but also what are they asking you to talk about? So for each one, I'm going to show a paragraph, take a minute to read it, and then I'll ask for feedback, whether you want to write about what you think works or what doesn't work. Are they doing one of the pitfalls that Kimberly talked to us about? And then we'll do a broader discussion. Okay, so Kim, could you move the slides? Okay, so what works well in their opening paragraph? What you think they could do to develop their ideas. So this isn't all about like just bashing this person. If you can find something, a lot of when we're working with students is, hey, tell us more about this. So if you can identify any of those things, what would you want them to tell you more about? Okay, next slide. Okay, so take a minute and read this. So can anyone, again, you could feel free to unmute yourself and say something, or if you want, if it's easier for you, you could just put it in chat. Is this student doing one of our pitfalls? And if so, which one? Maybe it's more than one. Don't be shy. Adam, go ahead.
From what I'm reading of it, it looks like it kind of falls into the pitfall of, I guess, the first one where you should avoid statements like I'm passionate about X.
Yeah, where they're telling, not showing. That is absolutely one of the pitfalls here. I'm convinced my personal and professional background would add immeasurably to your school, but we don't know anything about their personal. So they're just telling us and we're supposed to believe them. Much better if we knew about that student's personal and professional background that would add to the school's diversity. What else? Anyone else see anything about this essay that, or this opening paragraph that maybe could be changed?
This could I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, despite like the way it's written, it feels, I don't know, there's something wrong with the way it's written. Like how um it again, like the use of like big words, it's not really getting to the kind of like not really getting to the point in my opinion. Like it's kind of like I don't know, it just feels too much.
Yeah,
For
well,
lack of a
big
better
words is
term.
part of this. My
Yeah.
great interest in our jurisprudential system. Always use the fewest number of words you can. And I know that seems like, wait, what did I learn, go to high school and college for? Here I am telling you, use the least number of words that you can. And I have a good interest in law or a great interest in law. But if the student is applying to law school, it's not going to help them stand out at all because everyone applying to law school, I hope, has a great interest in law. So there's a couple things going on there. Yeah, but here, the big words don't help them at all. Let's see, Tina writes that it's very broad, not personal. You're right, because I don't know anything about this student. They tell us some things, they use some big words, but I don't know anything. Not sharing enough. Slightly too direct, does not dive into the specifics. Right, so there's no specifics here as well. But this also would be somebody, if I saw this opening paragraph, I'd say, things like, well, let's talk about what aspects of your personal and professional background make you think that you're a good fit for the school and their diversity initiatives. You don't need to mention academic success or LSAT score. Why? Because that will be visible elsewhere in their application. But if a student wanted to mention perhaps a senior thesis or a capstone that they wrote that focused on something relevant, maybe they could highlight or just mention that. It's an intro, so it doesn't have to tell us everything. But yes, so you got the idea here. Big words, they're telling us, they're not showing us. And because of that, it's actually not very personal. There's nothing that I would remember about the student if I'm reading 50 applications, other than it's really not very well written. So again, normal for a first draft. I also want to say that when we're doing these critiques, remember that many of these are like a first draft. And I never expect a first draft to be good. It's that incremental progress over time and what you submit on deadline day that matters. Okay, let's see a different kind of first paragraph. Okay, take a look at this one. We'll give you a minute to read. Okay, well, we got some laughter from Kimberly. Oh, Tony, a lot of BS.
This feels it feels too personal. It feels way too personal. If this is true, it feels way, way too personal. Like they're telling their life story.
Do you know anything about them?
No,
Right, well,
doesn't
it's not
seem like
telling
it.
us their life story then. I mean, I see what you're saying, but if at least we had a life story, we'd know something about the student. What else?
It sounds both very passive aggressive and also very like egotistical at the same time.
Yeah, passive aggressive ego. Yeah, I mean, part of it is like I read this and I automatically don't really like this person. They seem maybe too confident, or built up by their parents. And again, there's yeah, name throwing makes it worse. Yeah, the connections. My father's a doctor, my sister's in med school, ergo, I deserve to be in med school. Yeah,
It
sounds like
feels
they're
like they're
just
expecting you.
go ahead,
Sorry.
Ivan.
It feels like that's what I mean. Like before I said their life story, it feels like they're expecting you to know their life story. That's
Mm.
kind of what I mean with that a bit. Now that I read this a bit more.
Yeah. Oh, well, again, this is another example of telling, not showing. Other people have told me I'm great, ergo, I'm great. And I've even uses that word, my potential, and become something great. Um, just a rhetoric ploy. Yeah, Bisme asks, what is your interest? What have you done so far? Absolutely. We'd want to know, give us some actions, give us some things that you've done with all this potential that you talk about. Again, first draft, not the final draft. Oh, Kirsten, great point. Makes me question how this person would respond to the inevitable failure or difficulty in med school. Yeah, you're not seeing resilience here. You're not seeing flexibility or adaptability, which are probably things that med school might be looking for. Great. This one is in some ways so easy to comment on. Let me go to oh, Kim, can you go to 3? And Adam, this is the one that when you were asking about family, I was thinking of this as this opening here. So take a minute and read this. Okay, so sample 3, everyone's getting it. We're seeing similar comments. This seems like it's Grandma Betty's personal statement, or I know Grandma Betty better than I do the applicant. Saying, great, like you're all getting the point here. And I'm going back. Adam's original question was, what if my parents, and I'm going based on what I remember, influenced the trajectory that I'm on? I would not say it's not as if this person. Oh, Adam, go ahead. I see that your hand's up.
Yeah, I wanted to say like obviously this is like a little bit too much. It's kind of like I think other people said it best. It just seems like a personal statement for Grandma Betty as opposed to the actual person. But like, would a lesser version of this be acceptable? Like, oh, like this parent's actions, like they were this, and I was inspired by it. Like, kind of about like a fourth or a third of what the sample 3 described. Would that be
That
acceptable?
might be. And this is one of those cases. Again, I think talking to different people, you might get different suggestions. But one of the things that has worked for situations like this is open up that first paragraph, make it about you. And then in the second paragraph, again, you don't have to be chronological. You could go back in time and explain an inspiration. And that way, front and center, you're starting off with something that you've accomplished. And then you go into where this interest came from or how this inspiration came about. And that way it's not like, again, starting out with somebody else for a personal statement can just be really tricky. So even in this paragraph, if you flipped it so that you are opening up with something that you did or something that you care about or something, and then go to the inspiration. Lots of ways to go with that, but just make sure that the other person isn't the dominant character in your personal story. And Favor has the comment, also not showing anything like interest, right? And maybe that would have come, this is a first paragraph, so maybe we get that in the second, but we would like to know about the applicant's interest in that opening paragraph, right? It does make Grandma Betty seem like a very interesting person. That is the goal, but we want to feel that way about you as an applicant. Great, I think we have, is it one more? Let me just see
Yeah.
where we are with this.
Kristen, did you have your hand up?
Oh, sorry
Yeah,
if I missed that. Go ahead.
sorry. It was just like I wasn't sure how relevant this would be, but like obviously the AIDS crisis was a lot more predominant in or was believed to be predominant in homosexual communities when it first came out, but like research has shown it's not like a gay disease. Like so when you're writing about something like this, readers would be able, like if this was a med school application, everyone who's reading it knows like it is not strictly for the queer community, so would be like making sure the fact checking something that's like seems not completely true or implies something not true, is that going to work against her in this situation?
And that's a good nuanced question. And I would say that's why you always, well, whenever possible, have somebody outside your field read your essay and somebody in your field to read your essay. And that way you can cover all bases. Does somebody not from your field understand all the language you're using? And again, whether that matters, it really depends on the program. If you're applying to a PhD program in mechanical engineering, your only readers will be mechanical engineers, and having that outside reader is less important. But if you're applying for something that might be more interdisciplinary, having somebody from out and in your field, then all those things would be caught. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, then we'll do the third one. Yeah, this is the final one. And this Russian invasion was the one that happened years ago, not this current one, if it matters. What do you all think of this one? I'm not seeing any immediate response like you did for the last two, where it was immediate. Oh no, they're doing this. What about this? Yeah, Russia invading Ukraine. Yeah, well, they were in architecture, so they wanted to do something more relevant. Let's see, this, like more details on how any given universe. Yeah, and again, remember, this is a opening paragraph. You're hinting at a lot. The details then follow. And a lot of students, I see Jack's comment about military service. When we've done this workshop before, many students have picked up on where does this military component come in. So valid points. And maybe it can be more specific. That seems kind of vague. Military service, intelligence, and diplomacy, that could be considered three different career paths. What do you all think this one does? I should say that this was his final draft. This student got into every graduate program that he applied to. I mean, he only applied to like 4 or 5. What do you think works better with this one than what we saw already? So we can always find things to improve, always, even in a final polished draft. I read something a year later and say like, oh my God, why didn't that person fill in the blank? Even though I had helped them with their essay. But what do you think works better here?
I think they do a good job at introducing a complicated subject, but keeping it very personal. So like they're not getting into the weeds of the issues between Russia and Ukraine. They're talking about their family and their experience with it and what they decided to do with those events in their life. So it's
Right,
focused on them, but also in the context of something broader and important.
right. Personal, but also broader, personal, but also academic. You see how they talked about when this happened, these are the action items that I did. I suddenly, architecture wasn't for me. I suddenly gained vision and I took these kind of classes. I started reading these kind of literature, etc. What else? Let's see, there's another. Yeah, I feel like the political science to me makes sense. Notice this. I see a lot of students, this maybe happens most for law school in the essays that I read, where you have one paragraph at the end that you change for every school you're applying to. And to me, that's always like a little bit of a cheat. Like it's easy for students to do that, and law schools and other grad schools know that. So I always encourage students to mention the school in that opening paragraph. If there's a concentration within that program, say that as well. And whenever possible, weave that into the essay, the whole essay, not just in this obvious, here's my paragraph at the end about Penn's program in fill in the blank. Make it feel like there's a little bit more work involved and weave it in throughout, not just in one space. So we have that here. Okay, I know, I hope that these opening paragraphs were helpful. Some of them were kind of extreme, but that makes it easier to see some of the common things that we see. And hopefully, again, with some time, you'll be able to get that a useful opening paragraph and entire essay as well. I think, Bob, it's back to you for the wrap up.
Sure. So here's some additional quick tips for for success as you're writing. The most daunting part is, where do I start? Where do I even begin? And to that, I would recommend identifying what the essay is asking for. What are the prompts from the program? I know because I hear it happening often with students that I engage with. They might spend some time searching the internet, Googling how to write a personal essay. And there's probably some really decent content in there, a lot of like what we talk about here. But again, it's broad. So where do you start? I would start with the first school you want to apply to, or the school with the deadline coming up the fastest, and see what it is they want you to respond to. Then build an outline from that requirement. So in one of our earlier slides, there was a multi-component personal essay question. It had, I don't know, 5 or 6 different questions nested within the broad essay question. Use that as an outline to start building out your answers. Consider incorporating some core themes into your personal statement, your motivations, your interests, your experience, your skills, your goals in graduate school, and your future career plans, because these are likely themes you're going to encounter from over and over and over in application questions. And then the question about should I be chronological or thematic or whatever, to that I'm going to give a a not very satisfying answer, which is maybe, but not necessarily. I mean, personally, I think as a starting point, using an outline and building out from that locks you into the responding to the questions. That might be chronological, it might not be. You may decide afterwards, hey, I think I'm going to move this paragraph down here and move this up here for effect, for to highlight something, to make something stand out better. Uh, I don't worry personally too much about that. I'm sure my peers, my colleagues might have different perspectives, which is good, right? Like this is good things to have multiple points of view. Ultimately, it's your personal essay. So you want it to flow and feel and read the way you want it to. What else is up next, Kim? Be prepared to write multiple drafts. Yes, start writing early. I know this is hard. There's for many of you lots of things going on, but earlier you start, the easier it will be. You will not write the final draft on the first draft. There will be revisions. It's hard to say how many, right? A couple, 10, 15. It depends a lot on the writer, the effort that they're putting in, the complexity of the questions, um, and just your overall comfort level with writing. So it just depends. But there will definitely be more than one. Remember to directly answer the questions in the prompt. I'll use often an example from the med school application, which is a centralized portal, basically asks why medicine or why do you want to be a physician or a doctor or whatever. It's a simple one sentence basic question. And I've read some really nice pieces of writing, multiple pages, 2 pages long or whatever, whatever it is. And it's really nice, interesting, well written, and I have no idea why that person wants to be a doctor. So avoid that, right? Just remember, stick to the questions and then build out from there. Seek feedback from others. In a minute, I'm going to drop links to some of these resources, but these are some great places that you have access to. The University Writing Center, Fellowships Advising, the Pre-Professional Health Advising, the Career Center, perhaps your academic advisor, perhaps faculty members are willing and able and interested in contributing, helping out. And then finally, proofread, proofread, proofread. I mean, you'll get some of this along the way, but ultimately it's really critical to put that effort into proofreading. So here are, this will be tricky. I'm going to drop links to all of these in the chat. We'll do one by one, just so you have them. I believe all of these places will utilize Handshake or some other mechanism to schedule appointments one-on-one. If that's something that you're looking for, take advantage of it while you're here. Even post-graduation, at least I'll speak for the University Career Center, we will offer support for alums up to 5 years post-graduation. So not everybody has a straight line, from undergrad right to grad school. There might be a little, gap in the middle, which is fine. And then you decide, hey, I want to do this. I need some help. And then next. Any questions from all of you that we haven't already addressed? And I'm
Yeah,
sure
I
we're
think there's a
flying in the chat.
couple in chat. Is it okay to use a quote? I would never open with a quote because it's a personal statement. It can be tricky to open with a quote because it gets to that, the people reading these might read hundreds of essays. And if that quote is a real common one, it just reads like a cliche, even if it's meaningful to you. I never recommend opening with a quote or relying on a quote to say something for you. This isn't a research paper. It's much more of a reflective piece. But other people might feel differently about that. So I don't know if Kimberly or Bob has a different take on quotes.
I would agree with what Barbara said, and a lot of what I see that I advise against as well are direct quotes from those that maybe you worked with, like for example, like patients, or if they're from a work experience, if there's something that was said that you want to incorporate into your personal statement, I usually advise against that and advise toward more of like a reflection of that experience, not necessarily using somebody else's direct quote into your own personal statement.
We also had a question of how early should you start? Again, a lot of this depends on your work style, how much pressure you need to perform. A couple months in advance is great, but a lot of it really, how you work. And I like to, write something and be able to set it aside and then come back to it with fresh eyes, or write something, share it with somebody else, make some revisions, and then again, leave time to come back to it. And I see a lot of students work that way, but I've also worked with students who work best under pressure. And again, under pressure does not mean, like Bob was saying, starting to write your essay the day before. There might be an occasional student who's successful with that, but that's not the way to set yourself up for success. So know your own writing style or work style and go from there. I often encourage my advisees to get on my calendar and use that as a deadline for themselves. I ask applicants to send me their draft 24 hours in advance to give me a greater chance of being able to read it before the appointment. So if they know that, it means like, okay, if I'm meeting with Barbara next Friday, I have to have a draft by next Thursday. And that kind of thing can be, well, again, not saying you all have to meet with me, but use deadlines or appointments for yourself so that it's not all the pressure on that application deadline day.
I'd piggyback on to this a little bit too, Barb, thinking about, planning, timing, how much in advance, along the same lines as the letters of recommendation. Some folks that will write a letter of recommendation for you, faculty members, might want to see a draft of a personal
Yes.
statement to give them a better sense about you to help them write that letter. It doesn't mean you necessarily are giving them the final draft you're going to upload, but it's something that's readable and conveys the message. So if you're doing that a month before the deadline, it sounds like you should probably have something really close to finished about a month before the deadline. But not all faculty ask for that.
And when you all were sharing the kind of graduate programs you were applying to, I didn't see anyone who indicated a PhD. People came in later, so maybe we have some. I just wanted to make that caveat: if you're applying to PhD programs, your personal statement is more likely to be focused on your evolution as a researcher, or your evolution, your academic evolution, and it may or may not go into a lot of things that are sort of more personal or cultural identity, things like that. Again, it'll depend on the graduate program. So PhD students, you need to talk with a faculty member in your program and see if they have advice for you. And Tony asks, are applications better if they're submitted earlier? Again, in most cases, they're not here in the US, they're not reviewing applications till the deadline. So early doesn't matter, but there are going to be variations. So the question is, are they rolling admission or reviewing after the deadline? And I know that in a lot of European universities, for example, it's rolling. So the sooner you apply, you might know the outcome in 2 weeks. Whereas in a lot of the US programs, it's after the deadline, we'll start our review. But you can always ask. Most programs will have some sort of admissions coordinator. You could call or email them and ask, is there an advantage to applying early? In some cases, again, this might be more abroad than here, there might be more scholarship money if you apply early. That's, again, less of an issue here in the US. Favor asks if the introductory paragraph is like a summary that you expand on during the rest of the essay. It could be that, as long as it's not terribly boring, because sometimes just a summary could be sort of end up reading like that narrative resume thing. So it can be, but you do still want to make it a compelling opening paragraph. If anyone wants to add anything, please do. I see a question about for is that a psych doctorate applicants? I'm not sure if that's what that stands for. Should they be
Yeah.
more clinically focused in personal statements? Like, yes. You want to, again, highlight experiences that show you're prepared for what the program that you're applying for. Again, variations, med school and law school, you might be writing about very different things, but for a lot of the ones that are discipline focused, that it's going to be writing about things that show your preparation, interest, motivation for that program. Any other questions?
I have one if I can. I'm sorry for unmuting. I have one if I can
Go ahead.
ask it. Just because it'd probably be like faster to ask. Uh, if would it be acceptable to mention like an open house? Like, for example, in terms of I guess what was discussed before with how you got into whatever program you're going to or what drives your motivations. Is it acceptable to mention like an open house? As
You
in
mean
like you
an open house that you attended and maybe you spoke to some faculty members or current students or something like that?
Yes, because like if I can, I guess use an example, like when the program that I'm applying to, I went to the open house once, and at that point I fell in love with it. So would that be, I guess, with saying like my experiences during the open house, as well as all the different places of the program,
Yeah, and
would that
yes,
be
and that's
acceptable?
that sample 4. That's the one where the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They did do those kind of experiences, and in his essays, he actually mentioned some of the faculty members he spoke with. But so don't just say like, I fell in love with the program at the open house. You still want to give like, what was it that you felt like, what aspect, what specific things, the curious nature of the students or something specific, not just, I loved it kind of thing.
Something specific to the mission of the program.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
that's definitely an example that I would draw from if responding to a question about why this program or why this school, here's some evidence to support why you want to come here. And it also, in my view, shows you are really interested in them. You took the time to go to an open house versus I searched out 10 schools online. I'm going to apply to all 10 of them and hope for the best.
Mhm.
As of here, you're like, no, I'm really interested. I went to an open house where I met with Professor so-and-so and staff member whomever and a few students where I learned about the great internship opportunity. Like now you're really revealing interest and the time spent in researching them, which I think again goes to that separates you from others.
I think we're happy to stick around for a minute if somebody wants to ask us a question, not in front of the whole group.
Yeah, I'll
Right.
stop the recording
But
now.
everyone else, like, thanks for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Kim, too, for
Thank you all.
helping out. And I'm going to stop the recording and there we go.